Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I have a really fun card design for you where I'm going to be using this stripe stencil and create something completely different with it. So first I want to walk through some of the supplies that I will be using today. Starting with, I have a small piece of pitch black cardstock that I will be using for my sentiment. I also have two pieces of deluxe white cardstock cut to 4¼ by 5½. And then I have two more pieces of deluxe white cardstock cut to 5½ by 8½. I will be using this beautiful floral image from the Sweet as Honey stamp set, and I'm also going to be using that coordinating die. I have a sentiment from the Messages Stampin' Cut XL Message Strips Stampin' Cut XL, and also the coordinating die, and then the stripe stencil. For inks, I'm going to have the Unicorn Pigment Ink. I have Orchid and also Paradise that I will be using for ink blending. And then stamping my image, I have the Hero Arts Intensified Black Ink. I'll be heat embossing my sentiment using the White Detail Embossing Powder. And then for adhesives, I have some Hero Arts glue, low tack spray, which is the Pixie Spray. And I also have a few others that I'll be bringing in later on. And then, of course, my trusty tweezers. To add dimension to my card, I have some thin black foam squares and also some thin foam tape. So now this is the stripe stencil from Hero Art, and I am going to spray the back of it with Pixie Spray, which is a low tack adhesive. And I use this because these lines are kind of fine and tend to not want to stay in place just holding it down with magnets. So I lightly sprayed it with the Pixie Spray over my garbage can. I let that sit for a minute, and then I positioned it in this triangle or kind of a triangle shape on my card front. I made sure that that tip was pretty centered. I didn't measure it, I just kind of eyeballed it. And then I'm masking off these edges with some Post-it tape. And that's just going to keep it so I don't get ink over there. And then at the top, I'm using satin masking tape from ALTENEW. The reason I'm using satin masking tape up there is because Post-it tape is just not going to hold that down. So the satin masking tape really does the job. I'm going to start my ink blending with the Orchid ink that I have over there in my ink stand to hold it in place. And using my blending brush, I'm going to start at the top there and just kind of blend some color down about halfway. Now you also notice that I'm kind of holding these stripes with my fingers as well, just because stripes really do tend to move no matter what you do. So I find that just kind of helping hold that down with my fingers helps it kind of stay in place a little bit. Now I'm coming in with the Paradise ink, going over that area and down towards the point of my triangle there, and also making sure to blend into that Orchid ink, just so it has kind of a nice smooth transition. Then I'm going to carefully peel up that satin masking tape and also my Post-it tape to be able to remove my stencil. So this is a really fun look for the front of your cards to begin with, but I'm going to take it a step further. Now I'm taking my stencil and I'm going to line it up down in that bottom open area, but I'm going to make sure that my stripes are going in a different direction. I'm taking the edge of the stencil and I'm just scooting it down a little bit from where my previous lines ended, just to kind of show that little bit of a gap. And then once again coming in with my Post-it tape and that satin masking tape and masking off those areas. Just be sure that you're not actually putting that masking tape onto your cardstock if you want to do a full card front panel. I'm going to come in again with that Orchid ink, and I started with the purple because it's going to be right next to the Paradise. Then I'll finish off that area with the Paradise ink, remove the Post-it tape and the stencil, and repeat those same steps here on that other open edge. Just making sure to push down really good. I noticed that my Pixie Spray wasn't holding as well. I probably just didn't add as much as I should have to get that to hold it down better. I'll finish off this section and then I can come in again and remove my Post-it tape, which I love because it never rips my paper. And you can leave your card front just like this, but I decided to tone down those bright white areas. So I kind of masked off that main triangle once again, and I'm going back over those areas with my blending brushes. The purple, I was able to use that leftover ink, but the Paradise, I did have to pick up some more ink. And then once again, going over those other corners. Now, I didn't mask off these areas because they were pretty small. I wasn't really worried about my ink getting over the lines on that one. So I thought this was just a really fun new way to use your stencils, especially these ones that have the lines or kind of the designs in them like that. By just turning them, you're going to get a whole new look. Now I'm trimming that panel down to 3.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to move on to the image for the front of my card. So this is this gorgeous floral image from the Sweetest Honey stamp set. And this is why I brought in the larger sheets of cardstock. This is the 5.5 by 8.5. I'm stamping the image in the Intensified Black Ink, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough room to put my die on there and get that die cut perfectly. So that is why I brought in the larger sheet of cardstock. So I stamped that a couple times to make sure I had really good impressions of everything, and then die cut that out with the coordinating die. And I also used that other piece of cardstock to die cut out another blank one. I'm going to layer these together mainly because I really like having one more piece die cut behind it, layering it with liquid glue to add stability because sometimes they can get just a little thin if I want to add foam tape behind it, which I do. So I do prefer to add that stability. For the smaller sentiment, I am going to use that Message Strips Stampin' Cut XL stamp set. I have my black cardstock into my mini Misti tool. Once I lined up the sentiment in there and picked it up with the door of my Misti, I'm going to prep my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. This one is from Tailored Expressions, so I rubbed that over my cardstock, and now I'm inking up my sentiment in a unicorn pigment ink, which is a white ink. It stays wet for a longer period of time, but just tap gently on your stamp and then tap it gently down to stamp it because it can squish and smush your sentiment, and we want it to be nice and crisp. I'm going to sprinkle on my white detail embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then bring in my heat tool and melt this embossing powder. And I'm going to give you a close-up look of why I love stamping in the white pigment ink. When we bring this up close, you're going to notice that there are absolutely no gaps, crinkles, anything when I heat emboss that sentiment. It is absolutely perfect. To bring my cardstock back to that nice black cardstock, I buff over it with an anti-static powder tool. And if it still looks a little kind of hazy, I will go over it just very, very gently with a pencil eraser. I'll take the coordinating die and line it up over my sentiment, hold that down with that masking tape, and then die cut out my sentiment. And to help use up my scraps, I'm going to trim off some thin strips that are about the size of my sentiment. What I like to do with these is add stability behind my sentiment as well. This is a great way to add dimension and also use up that scrap piece of cardstock. So I added some liquid glue behind my sentiment. I placed those blank strips onto the back, and then I'm going to trim off any of the excess, and I'll do that about 2 or 3 times to help layer that up. Now that my sentiment is done, I took a piece of white cardstock and I trimmed it to the same size as my stenciled panel. I'm going to add some tape runner to the top of that and then add that stenciled panel over the top. This is another way to add dimension without having to go through so much foam tape. So I just line that up with the corners, and then I can add tape runner to the back of that and attach this to an A2 size panel, which is 4.25 by 5.5, just having the white margins on the left and right side. Now I am taking some thin foam tape and adding it to the back of my flower. I could also have die cut a few more sheets of cardstock, but I prefer to use thin foam tape instead, and then added that to the front of my card, and I can flip that over and trim off any of that excess. For the sentiment, I'm going to take the thin black foam squares and only add it to the left-hand side of my sentiment. That is the part of the sentiment that is going to overhang the edge of the flowers. The other half of that, I can add some liquid glue to, and then using my tweezers, I can just place this on the front of the card. And that's going to finish off my card project for today. So I hope this has inspired you to take a look at your stencils, and just by changing the orientation of it throughout your background, it creates a whole new look. All of my supplies will be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again real soon. If you enjoyed today's card project, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel and click the bell notification so you're notified when new videos are posted. Thanks again.